at the end, we'll be asking for ideas, suggestions of how to move forward in regards to what we want to do as a college. So those objectives obviously will, we just want to kind of keep those in mind as we go through this. We will also have a slide on actual resources that individuals can tap into. We can show this again later, but we want to make sure that students know that there is help and support out there, and that's also the case for faculty and staff. So we do have the resources here, and we have very talented individuals who can help. So please feel like, that's an option, and that availability is definitely there. As I alluded, I will be asking for input in regards to specific ideas that you may have. I've been fortunate to receive a number of responses already. We are compiling those lists of suggestions, and I think that's important for us to do. Also, individuals have shared their stories, and I think that's important too. So if you are comfortable in doing that, and of course, what I've told everyone who has shared a story is it remains confidential. No one is ever identified, but it does help, I guess, make everyone more aware of what goes on or doesn't go on, and should, in regards to the college. So we'll come back to those in really toward the end of our conversation. The only other thing I need to technically list out for you is I need to give you an update because I just got it today, but the second dialogue in diversity is being kind of put together as we speak, and it apparently is going to be a 6-faculty panel that will be put together as part of the conversation. If you were part of the original one, there were several hundred people in that conversation, and I think this is just obviously going to be an important continuation of that. So that should be scheduled sometime soon. They did not give us a date, but when that does become available, we will certainly send that information out. I'm sure they will as well, but just kind of be on the look for that. The other aspect I'd like to mention is I just want everyone to know that I have invited Chief Newton to the conversation. He's our University Police Chief, and I'm sure we welcome his thoughts and comments during this session as well. So I just wanted everyone to be informed. I don't have any specific order. I know the other one did have like the students talk first, along with then after a brief conversation having faculty and staff. I am perfectly fine with having that kind of sequence as well. I think it's hopefully is when everyone feels comfortable enough about sharing either their thoughts or ideas, especially in regards to what we should do as a professional community, then I think that's hopefully your cue to just let us know that you would like to share, and Abigail will keep watch as I will, and just unmute yourself and we'll kind of go from there. Who would like to start?
I guess this is Dixie. From my perspective, having worked for the students, are you talking about you want our experiences from on campus and what we've heard from students? Is that what you're looking for?
Absolutely. I think many of the students have wanted to just, literally write out their experiences. So I'd like to hear, your experiences, in particular as an instructor in the college, how we've, either met the needs of our students or have not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could speak from just the groups that I did with my black students or my black educators. And I remember in one particular meeting, because I have two black daughters, and one of my students said she never would have come to me with any questions if I hadn't said that I had two black daughters right from the start. And I said, well, why is that? Why not? And she goes, I would never go to a white professor. So, and then the other people there said the same thing. So I thought that was interesting that that particular group of people felt that way. And they didn't feel safe, coming to a white professor. So that was something that I was concerned about and wondered, what we can do differently to make everyone feel comfortable coming to us.
Absolutely. Did the students feel comfortable in talking with you after you disclosed that and set up that sense of understanding and trust?
Yes, and I did talk to them about, they said if the professor had come to them first and said, hey, do you have any concerns? How can I be of help to you? That kind of thing, then they would have been more likely to disclose how they were feeling, but they would never approach first. That's what they told me at that meeting. So I thought that was very informative because I hadn't thought from that perspective before.
Okay.
And I don't want to generalize to everybody, but that particular group said that, so I don't know if that's a common thing or.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but I think your students appreciated the fact that you made that disclosure right up front, and I think hopefully they had a better class experience because of it.
Yes, that's what they said. Mm-hmm.
I had one experience last semester, and it has stayed with me, and I keep questioning. So I walked it was the first day of class, and I walked into the class, and the first thing I do is I scan the room very quickly to see who's there. And there was one male black student sitting by himself, and everyone else, they were in their groups. And I walked in, and before I even said hello, I said hello in an animated way, and then I went to him and I was like, hey, why are you here by yourself? What's going on, And kind of put on a whole performance, and I said, no, you can't be sitting here by yourself. What's going on? And one of the students said, come on over, come sit with us. And then he got up, and he went over, and he sat with them, and she said to him, stuck with us for the rest of the semester, and I keep going back to that first day and wondered if I didn't say anything, would he have been by himself for the rest of the semester? And so I find my emotions changing, especially now during this time, with what's happening with the protests and so on. But it was just so amazing to see him grow over time, to see him, and he's a quiet guy. He's actually one of UT's footballers, but did an incredible job in the class and tutoring a second grade black student who was struggling, in his own life. So I keep going back to that day. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Didn't say anything, would he have been by himself? And then I had another student last semester, the only black student, a male student. And when after class he came to me and he asked the question, do you really have your PhD? And I don't know if it's because I'm black, and I was afraid to ask, why was he doubting me? What was it? What made him ask that question?
This is Lucky. Can you all hear me?
We can, Takwe.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Rhonda, did you ever get a sense of what the origin of the question really was?
You know, to be honest, I didn't know how to ask a follow-up question, and I am so embarrassed by that. You know, I mean, I didn't want to be insensitive. I just didn't know. He had just transferred from the engineering college to the education college, and again, he too was another student that I had to make sure and encourage, you know, for him to be with, you know, in groups and work with another partner and, you know, spend time with him after class and have conversations with him. But I just didn't know. I didn't know, and that also triggered, you know, I had a student years ago who said that he got an internship to work at Duke University for the summer in the medical field, and his mom didn't want him to get a college education, and he said he was basically fighting her because he would have been the first in his family to get a college, you know, degree, and he was determined to be, you know, the first Black family member to get a degree, especially in the medical field. And so I found that reminded me of, you know, families back home, but I just didn't know. Going back to the student who asked me about my degree, I didn't know. I really didn't know.
Well, yeah. Okay.
I had a similar question years ago. Excuse me. This is Sakwe.
Hi, Sakwe.
I had this exact kind of question. From this time, it was from a white student, and I was in the middle of a class. I think this was my second year, third year here, and we were talking something about special ed, and out of the blue was a summer course. He jumped up. He said, "Wait a minute. I want to know." His voice was very, very arrogant. It was attacking, literally. I want to know, do you have a doctorate, and from where? I want to know. And I was stunned in the middle of the class. And I said, "What did you do?" I just want to know. I want to know. He was very, very aggressive. And I want to know if you have a doctorate, and from where? And I said, "No, I do not have a doctorate." He said, "When I was coming to Toledo, I forged all my papers. But please don't tell the dean, he does not know." So that was my response. And of course we laughed about it in the class.
I was going to say, hopefully he appreciated everything. What kind of relationship emerged after that?
He was very cordial after that. He was very, very cordial. There was no sense of arrogance again when he approached me. It was like, "Thank you, Professor. Thank you, this." And there's no more voice of arrogance or attack or anything like that. So the class went well. It was a summer course.
Okay. Well, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Others?
Well, so my name is Cortez Scott, and I'm a doctoral student in the social and philosophical foundations of education program. So number one, I want to acknowledge that I do appreciate that we're all here, and there's a lot of people who are attending right now and able to participate on this in this conversation. And I do want to make sure that we make the most of it because, you know, already entering the conversation, we're a little bit limited on time. For me, I'm really concerned about how we actually plan to move forward as a college or within the College of Education. Speaking from my own personal experiences, and I want to be transparent, but also want to tread a little lightly moving forward, but I participated on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee within the College of Education my first year in the program almost 2 years ago. And, with me, I bring, a few years of experience working in college and higher education, specifically in diversity and inclusion. And I must say that it was a little frustrating as a student and as someone who is really passionate about diversity and inclusion, about the things that we had as agenda items every single time that we met, but how little we were actually able to do. So when I see questions of what are some specific ideas and how we plan to move forward as a professional community, I think the first thing is recognizing the services that we already have in place and then being reflective and honest with ourselves about whether or not those resources that we have in place are contributing and doing the things that they're set out to do. And if not, what are those actual shortcomings, or why are we not achieving a lot of the things that we are setting out to do? The next thing, too, and I've outlined some of these things in a personal email to you, Dean Whitty, was recognizing just our teacher preparation in general. And I know that I have peers inside of my program who are really passionate about that, and they can speak a lot more to that because that's more of their interest and expertise. But it is really a concern as a Black male, African-American, who's also largely interested in working with African-American students upon graduation from this program, of how are we preparing not just white people, but how are we preparing all people to be working with these largely neglected communities of color? Because just having the one, either TSOS 2000 or TSOS 3000, really serves as a detriment, because you can't get all of the things that students need to be learning and need to know about working with marginalized communities and students within 15 weeks. And then, of course, there's also that self-reflective piece of that as well, in terms of students being able to challenge themselves. So I think that those are at least two things, because I don't want to take up too much time, but those are at least two things that are of general concern to myself that I'm really hoping can be addressed in the near future within JHCOE. So thank you.
Certainly. Thank you for that input. And I don't want to maximize the time. I want to hear from everyone else, but excuse me. I know I am aware that the diversity committee has been frustrated in what they've been able to do. All I can say is that committee has now been placed organizationally in a different situation and is now actually connected with the dean's office as opposed to a faculty committee. And I plan on utilizing that committee to hopefully move forward with many of the suggestions that we are pulling together today and hopefully in the future. So that hopefully will be a new day in regards to hopefully addressing things of real substance. The other limitations that I'm aware of is there's no funding source for the diversity committee, and unfortunately, I don't have a ready cash, but I am looking at trying to find donors, and we will hopefully remedy that to some extent. For your other quick comment about, I understand TSOS 2000 or 3000. Yes, I think it would be wonderful to have more courses devoted to that. Our difficulty is we have such hard edges in regards to accreditation and the number of hours that we ask our students to complete. It's very difficult to keep adding hours and having our students graduate in a timely manner. So I don't want to move away from this point, but I would probably recommend that we take a look at embedding more of this kind of content and conversation and awareness in our existing courses, as opposed to adding new courses on to an already heavy hour demand for our teacher candidates. So I'll answer, or that'll be it for the moment, but we can obviously continue to have conversation and will in regards to that. Other ideas or comments?
Yes, this is Mrs. Fakui? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, Franklin, you go.
Oh, thank you. First, I want to thank you, Dean Whitty, for organizing this meeting, because there is a lot of, let's say bluntly, racism in higher education. A number of you have seen my announcement about my novel, Black Professor, White University. I looked over 250 articles regarding racism in higher education, especially against blacks and Hispanics and Native Americans in higher education in terms of promotion, tenure, and acquisition of jobs and other things, recognition within higher education. It is more prevalent, is deeper than we realize. And I'm glad that with the prevailing situation, our college is sticking the situation right on the horn. Obviously, we're not going to go back, and I commend the NFL for coming out with a statement that they made a mistake. Maybe that's not going to be said in higher education. But it is very important to note that in higher education, there continue to be many instances where people of color are marginalized. They face macro-aggressive attitudes. Those are the many subtle racist comments and behaviors that they face on a daily basis. My novel covers quite a bit of them. And I'm hoping to do a non-fictional work on the same topic, dealing with macroaggression and racism and marginalization, exclusion, non-support, etc., of people of color in higher education. It's extremely prevalent. And it's very important that we look not only at the surface, but the deeper elements of the extent to which people of color in higher education face on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. It is very, very, very important. No one is asking for preferential treatment. No one is asking for treatment that they do not deserve. But everybody is seeking, whether it's in the police force, whether it's in the higher education, the importance of justice, just and equal treatment of all. And that's what we need to be looking at, because believe it or not, it's very prevalent. It's very prevalent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lynn, did you have a comment?
Just really quickly, I will second Saki's thanking you for having this meeting, Dean Whitty. I've been here since 1994 with a brief break. I am pretty sure that I am accurate in saying that a dean has never let the word racism be discussed in an open forum before. So this is a huge step forward. I'd like to echo what I think I was hearing Fakui and Cortez saying, that we need to have a way that we're going forward with this, and I would suggest, for starters, that at every faculty meeting, that we decide that we are going to talk about racism in higher education, racism in K-12 education, and then if we want to branch out from that, we can, and that we start with talking about how it is structural racism, and when we sit meeting after meeting around a table that is all white, it's very difficult to argue that we do not have structural racism, yet whenever that comes up, whoever raises it is shouted down, no, don't use that word. So thank you, Dean Whitty, and it's great news that the Diversity Committee actually has a place in the structure now. Thank you.
Certainly. I'm relatively new to the position. I have a lot to learn, but I have good people around me, and I am going to rely on those individuals to give me direction, and that includes our students, because, obviously we need to do the very best job we can to make sure every student feels valued. It's that simple. And I want to make sure that happens. And if it's not, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to fix it, and then we're going to continue to move on. So thank you for those comments. Anyone else like to share either ideas or experiences that you've had in the college?
I'd like to, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Chris.
Okay. Yep. My name is Chris. I'm a doctoral student in the educational psychology program. And I think I don't have a background in education as far as another teacher. I'm not really on campus that much. But as I was reading the email, and I did send you a response, which I'm not really bothered if you share the details, because I thought one of the things that you said, which I picked up on, which I thought was extremely important, was the phrase you used of basic daily operations. And I work in the court system and have done for like over 10 years. And for me, the situation with George Floyd, as sickening and disturbing as it was, that to me is kind of an example of some of the actual pillars or bricks of structural racism. And I think I put in my email how where you said the basic daily operations, it's not just the brutal images that we see on television or that are caught on camera. It's the social policy, it's the defining and marking of spaces and places based on skin tone. It's the hiring practices. It's the conversations behind closed doors. And these situations, despite well-meaning dialogue, and I'm not talking about today, but well-meaning dialogue in the past, have done probably not enough, and hasn't happened in terms of substantive change. That stuff hasn't happened quickly enough for a lot of people, and it becomes extremely frustrating. I don't want to butcher the gentleman who spoke about his novel, butcher his name, but what he was saying as far as a black professional, just like I see in the court system a lot of qualified people of color, and there becomes there's a ceiling to where you can only get so far. It won't let you get up to positions where you can actually have an impact. You can have tons of supervisors, but they won't actually make it to the administrative position. You mentioned the NFL. They just introduced the Rooney Rule along with draft picks, compensation, to make sure that there are enough coordinators moving from that level to the level of head coach. And that is one of the instances that I've seen in the NFL. I've seen it in the criminal justice system. I cannot speak on the college because I'm not on campus a lot, but it might be something that maybe you guys could speak on. Is it something that is prevalent there? From somebody's earlier comment, it will sound like it is. I think that's what Dr. Seamus said. You see the discussion tables and you see a lot of white faces. And I think as you unpack and try to deconstruct what racism actually looks like, again, it's not always those horrific images. It's the basic daily operations that go on and on and on and on without any attempt to try and change the status quo.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have?
Hi, everybody. I hope you guys can hear me. It's Jessica Swan. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm a doctoral candidate in educational psychology, and I just completed my last year of GA-ship in the college and in the foundations department. And you know, I was one of the students who emailed Dean Whitty in response to his email. And I really don't feel the need to cite specific examples of issues in the college, but with so many faculty members on the call, I really think that it's important for you all to, at some point, understand those examples, hear what they are, and they're not just mine. Other people, I'm sure, have sent theirs forward, and recognize that those mindsets are embedded in your college, in the office next to you, down the hall, and wherever else. These people are present, And while I respect people's thoughts and their ability to decide for themselves, the reality is that racism is insidious, it's malignant, it spreads around, it affects policy and practice, it affects how people view what is done, what decisions are made, and I think that everybody needs to realize that that perspective that's going to come from seeing the experiences that your students have had and recognizing that these are the people in the offices next to you should inspire you to say, this is not who we are, this is not what we want, this is not the situation that we want to create, and we don't condone this behavior no matter what tenure says. And I think that's really important. And I recognize that, you know, there's a lot of protection and that people can't be fired for their mindset, but they can be condemned. And they should be by their peers and by the people around them who say this is not characteristic of the environment that we want to create. So I think that one of the important things, which we all know because we study racism in an educational setting, is that we have to deal with our own biases first. And admitting to them is really important because you can't deal with something that you don't even know is going on. I think that our practices in higher education, all the way from admittance to undergraduate degrees, all the way up to hiring on the highest level, are a product of a tradition that is, excuse my language, white in its nature, and that by its nature it excludes people of color. And that is a systemic problem in higher education, I think, throughout this country, one that all of you as faculty members and professors need to accept and address because it's not characteristic of what you claim you want the institution to be. And so really, I hope that people see a need for change first at home and then on a larger level, because that's the only way that we're going to be better. And if we support our communities as institutions of higher education, as public institutions of higher education, and take a stance that protects our public and it's aligned with what we believe as a country, I think that we'll do better. But until people know what that actually means and not just show up to work and, you know, follow our plans. I sat on diversity committee too. It was really hard. I sat on it for a couple years. But I just want to see us actually move our feet and not just our hands. You know what I'm saying? Not just to write and to say what we're going to do, but to do it and to mean it.
Absolutely, Jessica. Well said. I am in complete agreement.
If I can add to that, please.
Right.
If I can add to what Jessica just said, it was well said. One of the things I found in the literature were concepts such as diversity as acceptance, diversity as intent, diversity as liability, and diversity as commodity. And these issues very, very, for example, diversity as acceptance is accepting the notion that we need diversity, but doing nothing about it. Diversity as intent is intending to effect diversity, but that's the end of the effort. Nothing is done. And diversity as liability is saying we really want to diverse, but there are so many disadvantages if we do diverse our institution, etc., etc. In other words, it's not just enough to say, but what we need to do is to do something about diversity. I've served on various diversity committees since I've been here, I don't know from when. I came in 1986 and served on various diversity committees. I've served on various other committees that directly or indirectly dealt with diversity, recruitment, student recruitment, teacher recruitment. I cannot tell you how many such committees I've served on. But if you look at the statistics of the college and the university, there is not much change in terms of diversity. So again, I commend Dean Whitty for this, because this is the very first step into putting, teeth into what we want to do. So that it's not just enough to talk, but we must do something to effect diversity. We must do something to ensure that there is diversity in terms of student recruitment, staff recruitment, faculty recruitment, and retention, promotion, etc., etc. We must do something to ensure there is not marginalization of our students, our graduate students, our undergraduate students, and our faculty and staff. I cannot tell you how many students of color have sat in my office and wept because of some of the treatment they've received. And I try to help them over the years to overcome those situations by doing one thing or another with them, whether it means working with them until they get through a course or offering them an independent study course with me so that we can work together on whatever their problem is, etc., etc. We need such efforts in the college and throughout the university to ensure that we have diversity, not only to say diversity, but to do diversity, to reflect diversity, to reinforce diversity, and to promote diversity. And it has to be genuine. It's not a one-day thing. It's not a 2-year thing. It has to be across the board at all times.
Yes, I would agree. We have to be accountable. I have to be accountable, and I think it starts with us. So I think that's at least the message I'm trying to convey. Dr. Kumar, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
Well, I was actually going to respond to Jessica, and then I also wanted to talk about educational psychology. And I have to say, I'll start with educational psychology. My colleagues in educational psychology and I have been working really hard to make sure that even in the undergraduate courses, we incorporate issues of social justice and cultural responsiveness. It has been a sort of mission that I have felt as important. That I think that was one. And two, I just wanted to let you know that, based on data that I collected from our own free service teachers, one of the things that came out was that the more multicultural education courses they take, the more responsive they are. They tend to be more culturally responsible, and really the things like adapting instruction for culturally diverse students is important. And this is based on longitudinal data as well, and from 3,000 of our students. So I think it's well worth considering what that means, what those results mean when we are thinking about the courses our students take. And there's a very quick point, following up on what Jessica said, is that we need to be. She talked about people in the next room, in the next offices, in the next rooms, and so on. And I think the basic thing is developing self-awareness, and that is easier said than done. I don't know if I'm brown, I'm not black, I'm not white, but I have seen that played out absolutely unconsciously in my case, where I had to go for promotion a year later because two faculty who were senior, who actually had joined after the college after me, were going that year. So those sort of things. When I went in for full professor, I was like, why don't you look at so-and-so's dossier? Somebody was going up from assistant to associate. And that was done not with the intent. I had no doubt that the person who told me devalued me or did not think, he was trying to help me. But the very fact that those statements were made suggests that it is very insidious. It is, you don't recognize that this is going on. Even the person saying it doesn't recognize. And so that is where we have to work. And that is, I think, easier said than done. Thank you. And thank you for organizing this.
My pleasure. I know we're running close to our mark. I would just like to ask Chief Newton, would you like to say a few words in regards to how the University Police Force is being impacted, and or what kind of additional thoughts you have in regards to either ongoing or additional training and communication that needs to exist?
Yeah, well, thank you for having this. As far as I know, you're the only college that's doing a forum like this, but really the problems that we're talking about, they exist in all colleges, they exist in all segments of society, in our healthcare system, in our education system. So there's a lot of root causes. They're manifesting in horrible ways in our police, but we know they exist everywhere. So hats off for having this dialogue. We're listening a lot. I listened a lot during the forum. I certainly don't want to I can get on a soapbox. But we're doing a lot of listening, and we're partnering with, I think we've been ahead of many municipal police agencies, understanding that we really need to gain the trust of our community that we serve. And higher education and policing and higher education has long understood the value of community policing, where sometimes in municipalities that's been secondary. So we've done a lot of that hard work on the front end, and I think it's helping us, and we have good relationships. Matter of fact, with some of the protests that have touched our campus, we've worked in conjunction with the student organizers of protests, and they've done tremendously soothe, and we've been able to support them in ways that were helpful to them, and we plan on continuing to do that. So, the education piece is very interesting, and I'm listening to the dialogue, and you're all educators. And it can be confusing because you'll hear a lot that education is the solution out of some of these challenges that we're facing, and I believe that it certainly is. But we also are, as a police force, receiving probably more education on multiculturalism, on bias-free policing, than any other profession. We do it every year. I have policies on it that are specific to my employees that guide their daily operations on being unbiased. You will find that in a lot of other professions. In addition to the university policies, we do daily training briefs, many of them training on our bias-free policing policy. So there's a tremendous amount of attention on bias-free policing now, yet we still have problems as a profession. So that's troubling. But maybe it means it's working, because I'm not seeing those problems here on campus. So hopefully, I assume that other police departments are doing every bit as much education and training as we are. We're still experiencing problems. But we know that these are root problems. These are problems that exist in our society, not just as law enforcement. And we've got a lot of work to do. Hiring, I will say, for us has been a real challenge. Probably to nobody's surprise, no one really wants to be a police officer nowadays. When I hired in the late 90s, I tested with 100 other individuals for one position, and now we're lucky to get 20 people to put in for a position. So not only are we challenged to hire minority applicants, we can barely get applicants, period. So it's challenging times ahead of us, but I'm so confident that we are going to move forward, and tomorrow is going to be better than today, and there is going to be a lot of positive that comes out of the protests that we're seeing, and I look forward and welcome the changes.
I do have a question for you. I want to know if the university's policy or the university police's policy is already designed to ensure that, adequate or appropriate force is applied, or what, I want to know what you guys are doing with your policy to ensure that similar things are not happening on our campus to anyone, but to especially populations that are at higher risk when they encounter the police.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we made a tremendous investment, because it wasn't cheap, in partnering with a company called Lexipol, Lexipol, and they are a national company that manage police policy manuals and making sure that they're in complete compliance with best practices. The policies are automatically updated based on court rulings about new best practices that come out. Matter of fact, our use of force policy has long prohibited cartoid holds, chokeholds. So that's been forbidden in our policy for a while. the policies come with a daily training brief that our officers are delivered electronically. They go through a training brief. Many of the trainings are on unbiased policing, use of force. Of course, the daily training briefs always hit some of our more critical policies, which those certainly are. All of our policies are available online on our website. We try to be very transparent about policies, and they're important. They guide our operations, and you'll find that departments that are out to date in their policies, that are not doing training, are probably some of the departments that are having some of these issues, frankly.
Okay, just so I understand, it sounds like obviously you're doing so many things. We can all be assured that none of our officers would ever be in a situation where they would be putting a knee on someone's neck to restrain them. Is that a fair statement or a true statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was horrified when I saw the video. You know, in my mind, it's probably more horrific than I would think of the average person watching, which I know the bar is pretty high. I mean, you're watching somebody die unnecessarily. I mean, it can't get more horrific. But for me, I understand that person's higher level, that police officer's higher level of responsibility. That person is there to protect the community and to promote safety. And the very first rule should be do no harm. Above all, do no harm. Just like the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm above all. So, you know what? People have asked me for a couple ideas of what I think would improve police performance in this area. And there's two suggestions that I give, and one is that I think all police officers should be at-will employees. And I know there's value to union organizations, but there's many layers of protection for police officers. I'm a command person. I'm an at-will employee. The universe can get rid of me tomorrow if they don't like my work. But I'll tell you, you saw that Minnesota officer had 16 complaints on him. Here's the newsflash. It's very hard to terminate a public employee. They can have a laundry list of complaints. The union will come. They will fight. And you're seeing more and more some of the unions come under some criticism. But they defend employees, to the bitter end. And it's to the detriment of society. A second idea that I think I just recently heard a little bit more discussion about is when a citizen commits an assault, a simple assault, on another citizen, it's an M1, it's a misdemeanor 1, it's a high-level misdemeanor in some cases. But if they commit that same assault on a police officer, it elevates, the penalty elevates, it's a felony 5. Well, in my mind, if an officer is convicted of a crime, that penalty should be elevated because they have, again, undermined the public trust and they had a higher duty. And it's just another element that I think every day a police officer should show up to work believing that their employment rests on their performance every single day. And if it's not there, then I think we tend to have issues.
There are only two other things, and I'm really sorry to interrupt again, but I want to make sure that UT officers are also trained to intervene when they see one of their own committing something that is against policy and procedure, and that is a requirement for those officers. And I want to make sure that that I mentioned, in education we are trained to engage in certain practices that are intended to protect the students and the rest of the students and the staff and faculty when they're out of control. And mind you, and I say out of control when I mean, it's not a good use of language, but, a student in crisis behaves in a certain way, and we have training that is in place that does not result in asphyxiation, that cannot result in asphyxiation, that ensures appropriate restraint without injury to the person, and it can be used appropriately with people. And I wonder if the police need to look into less aggressive restraint styles that would protect the person to a greater extent.
Yeah, both good questions. Happy to report yes on both. Our officers are all CIT trained, crisis intervention team trained, and that is a tremendous commitment. It's a 40-hour training block, so it's 5 days of 8-hour training, and it focuses on dealing with citizens in crisis. It's put on in conjunction with the Lucas County Mental Health and Recovery Services. It's awesome training. All of the officers go through it. At minimum, we have a 40-hour block of crisis intervention team training. And again, a 40-hour commitment is a massive commitment. I would challenge you to find any other employee at the university that has that level of commitment outside of counseling and psychology. And we absolutely have requirements for officers to intervene in situations where other officers are committing misconduct. So, again, but, we're in higher ed. We're a small bucket, and I think we're a pretty progressive area in law enforcement. There's big fish out there to fry. I do have a pretty strong voice in the community. I head up a lot of, meetings and part of committees that I think have a lot of influence in Lucas County because I've been at the seat and at the table for a while. And I feel pretty good about our law enforcement response, not to say that it can't improve in Lucas County, but I'm going to continue to make sure that my voice is heard in these important areas.
And Lee, I know we to end all of this, but I just wanted to say really quickly before we end, and this is in partial response to your response to my question in terms of the classes that we offer. During last semester, there was a search going on for a position, I believe it was with social studies, within the College of Education, and I had the privilege of sitting in on a number of those. And then there was one that I was really excited about. It was a gentleman whose philosophical perspectives in terms of teaching were heavily reliant or reflective of John Dewey and being super progressive. All of that to say that I understand that we're kind of like on a hiring freeze with our faculty members, and that an idea is to talk more about how we incorporate these ideas of progressivism with multicultural perspectives, diversity, inclusion, and all those other things. I appreciate the idea of having that more reflective in our curriculum, but it's truly the people who actually believe those things that will push it within the curriculum. So once we get to a place where we start to hire more faculty members, I think that should be something that is imperative, or something that we're actually looking for with new faculty members in terms of what their philosophical beliefs are and how they actually plan to intentionally incorporate aspects of equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racist teaching and pedagogy and abolitionist pedagogy and all these other different things that we're not receiving in our current outdated curriculums to an extent. So I think that there's a lot of growing new literature that's out there that we as an institution should definitely be looking to follow and incorporate. And as we continue to look at future faculty members and different things like that, I think that should be something that should be at the forefront of our future search processes.
I think you make a good point. I would love to be in a position where we could be hiring new faculty. I'm hopeful that sometime in the relatively near future we will be doing just that. But at the same time, I think we need to work with the faculty that we have. Without question, I will be looking at garnering kind of interest as well as support for faculty training, because I think it's obviously imperative that we have this conversation. I am going to make true on my statement about involving the adversity committee. I'm going to hopefully be able to partner and have them lead to a great extent on some initiatives, one of which I will share briefly. I know we're over time. I apologize. I have spoken with the provost. She is in support of creating an annual symposium where many of the issues that we have talked about would be discussed, brought to public awareness, look at progress or lack thereof. Now, I have unfortunately no funding for this, so I'm going to have to work hard to find donors who will back this kind of initiative. I'm relatively confident that I can find those individuals. I already have my development officer working on that possibility. So we could be looking at something either by the college, or truly I would rather see this as a university direction, or at least a combination, where we can really have this continuous conversation, because I think if we don't, other things unfortunately take time away from this, and this can no longer exist. So that might be one way, at least structurally, and as a system, we can do that, but I think we have to go inside the college as well. And I think that starts with the faculty and the students, and having good conversation, working on things, making people aware of their biases, which we all have, and trying to become better through that process. So I'm going to remain optimistic and hopeful that the pieces can kind of start fitting together. We have tentatively looked at the possibility, and please understand it is a stretch, but we would like to try to somehow make this symposium at some level come alive as soon as the spring of 2021. We will see. I will have to lean on the university committee and their talents to see what that could look like, what kind of resources we can get together, how quickly we could do this. And of course, it's all structured within a pandemic. So we're, you have something that's face-to-face, you have something that's virtual. Those are questions that we're going to have to really talk about, plan for both options, I guess, technically, and see what we can do. But I think as a college, we just need to come together and rely on each other. So, and once again, I apologize for taking everyone over their time. Any other comments that anyone has that they'd like to share before we finish up?
I had a comment I wanted to add to kind of piggyback on what Parker was saying. In terms of inclusion, and when you're looking for faculty, I heard you said you're on a hiring spree, as a lot of institutions are. When you do hire that person, and if you're trying to be inclusive and it is somebody of color, I guess the desire will be for somebody who's competent. Please don't put a black or a brown face in there just to say that you actually have one, because that doesn't achieve or accomplish anything. And secondly, I don't, as I said, work in education. I work in the criminal justice system. So to kind of hit on what Commander Newsom was saying in terms of we have policy, we have training, and yet this stuff is still happening. I echo exactly what he's saying, because I've seen the very same thing occurring in the court system. We have policies, we have lovely binders, and sometimes those don't become something that we rely on a daily basis. Maybe we don't even look at it past orientation. And it would be nice to see if you could have a policy manual that becomes a living and breathing document, because you have human beings, as you said, who are biased. And that bias, that implicit bias, affects every single decision that is made. But it affects us to the point that we have disproportionality within the court system. We have disproportionality in arrests. We have disproportionality when it comes to sentencing. So all of that is occurring even though we have beautifully written policies. So that policy needs to be something that needs to be dusted off and become a living, breathing document, because it's still happening. We're still having the same conversation that we've been having for decades. And we can write policies till we're blue in the face, but until more credence is given to what is actually written on those pieces of paper, we're going to continue to have just pleasant conversations.
Yeah, Chris, I think you're right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dinwiddie, I'm sorry. I keep interrupting. There's one last thing I want to say. You know, I know that you guys are in the hiring freeze and that things are very interesting in terms of budgets and funding, and I have no doubt about that. I've worked in admin before, and I know what it gets like when it gets tight. But as you noted, the college will recover, the university will recover, and the decisions that are made once that recovery happens, or as it's happening, I think will matter more than anything else. It's almost it's strange that, you know, coronavirus put us in this position, and now here we are looking at restructuring in multiple dimensions, you know, and I think that it's, as thick as it is, it's a fresh start for a lot of things. But I hope that when that time comes that you can hire faculty, that you do hire faculty of color, and I'm going to do something unpopular and emphasize that that person of color needs to be representative of American-born people of color. And I am not diminishing the experience of our Black and brown faculty that are international at all, but it is a different experience of being Black. And I want to make sure that the college understands that and recognizes it. And furthermore, that when that time comes, perhaps that faculty member is invited in, understanding that, you know, they will participate in the diversity activities in the college because they're being brought in for their expertise in that area.
Absolutely. We're fortunate to have Dr. Johnson coming in the fall. But yes, we need to continue that focus. So absolutely. Anyone else? If not, thank you very much. Please, if you do have ideas that you have shared today or that you would like to add to, my email address was on the last slide. All you got to do is type in my name on the search engine and it should come up. And we'll be happy to take all those ideas. I'm already, like I said, creating a list. And I would also appreciate experiences because this is how we're going to move forward, and this is how we're going to learn. So, with that said, thank you all very much, and take care and stay well.